For the last several years, resilience has been the buzzword. How do we help our kids to be resilient? And there's a good reason for it. Resilience is on the way down. We're seeing more and more data that's creating more and more concern around how our children are backing up when things get challenging. Do they have the grit, the determination, the persistence? Do they have the flexibility and the adaptability? G'day and welcome to the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day. This is Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson, and today I'm having a chat with a guy who I think has a few things to share with us about how to build resilient kids. His name is Tim Curtis. Tim's personal journey has very much shaped what he understands resilience to be. I want to share this bio with you because I think that it's out of the ordinary, and there's going to absolutely be some things here that you and your kids will benefit from. Tim grew up in a military family. He experienced constant change, new cities, new schools, new neighborhoods, and a need to adapt to all of those new environments. He faced challenges like bullying, being heartbroken, and the occasional teenage brawl. But he didn't let this define him. Indeed, his childhood experiences culminated in him receiving a military scholarship and spending 16 years in the Army, including in the elite SAS, the Special Air Service Regiment, where he learnt the essence of performing under pressure. We haven't had too many military folks on this podcast over the years, and I'm always in awe of the work that they do and the way that they perform a duty to this country that very, very few people are willing to do it. I'm always staggered by what they're willing to do. But beyond his military career, Tim has led cross-cultural teams in some of the world's most challenging environments. He's witnessed the depths of human suffering, but also the incredible power of strong families and connected communities in shaping a child's future by building their resilience. He's got a brand new book out. Well, actually, it comes out next Tuesday. It's called Building Resilient Kids, drawing from his diverse experiences and providing a comprehensive guide on fostering resilience in our kids. Now, Tim, so good to have you on the pod. You're not a school teacher. You're not a child psych. You're not an academic. So there's a really different view to how you've written this book and what it's all about. I want to pick up on a couple of things straight off, just out of your bio. First off, all of the moves. You're a kid. You're moving around all over the countryside. How did you deal with it? Because we get this question all the time via email, and people are saying, we're about to move. Is it the right thing or the wrong thing? Are the kids going to be resilient? And there's always been this idea, kids are resilient. They'll be able to move into and adapt to the new environment. No problem at all. What's your take?
Maybe jump to the research, then I'll give you the answer. The research is inconclusive. Does geostability assist resilience? If you're in the same place, building connections with friends, does that assist you in the social layer of your resilience or not? Or conversely, does portability assist you in, to use your word, that adaptation? And that inconclusiveness is kind of interesting in itself. But my individual experience is maybe twofold. The first thing is the pillar of strength provided by family. No matter what school we were going to, no matter what neighbourhood we were in, no matter what new sporting club, mum and dad were always there for us. And we know the research says that as little as one parent or carer or other adult that's there for a child will assist in resilience. And the second part was using prisms and vectors like sport, for me generally team sport, as a way to not just build skills, but also social connection. And so as a result, as the removal vans were pulling away from the house, my brother and I, who was also a part of my bedrock of family, were knocking on neighbourhood doors, asking the parents, hey, have you got any kids? And that inevitably led to these solid foundations of friendships that have preserved all around the country for us as we've grown older.
I just love the example of going and knocking on the doors and saying, have you got any kids? We're looking to play. I can't imagine that there are too many families in 2025 who would say, oh yeah, kids did that all the time. Really, really unusual. Let's fast forward. We can talk about military. We can talk about so many other things, but there's something in your bio that grabbed me when I first found out about the book and the work that you were doing. And it was this: witness the depths of human suffering, but also the incredible power of strong families and connected communities, world's most challenging environments. I don't know how far into it you would like to go, but the work that you've done militarily and since in these environments, it's the kind of stuff that people can't help but tune into and say, I just need to know more. What have you done? Where did you go? Who did you do it with? What did it mean? What can you share in terms of specifics? Will you share one or two things, one or two stories that highlight how your experience has helped you to be more resilient and support the resilience of others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 2 decades working in the world's most inhospitable locations, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Somalia to Sudan to South Sudan to Sierra Leone. And I definitely did, hand on heart, witness the worst of humankind, the worst that humans can inflict on other humans, but also how these humans, even little humans, are able to get through it, are able to persevere or persist. And perhaps 2 stories. The first is in my time in Sierra Leone. I spent 10 months as a military advisor to the government of Sierra Leone during the heights of the Civil War. And when I first arrived, having never been to Africa before, but having done my research and thinking, look, technically this doesn't look like a difficult job. The opposing forces, the anti-government elements were reasonably primitive. Their tactics were fairly basic. But I asked around in the formative few weeks, what are you most scared of? Now, British Army trained Sierra Leone Army soldiers came back with a very common answer. What we're most afraid of is the small boys unit. Now, the small boys unit of the Revolutionary United Front, that anti-government element, were children as young as 6. Now, to get your head around that in our context in the Western world is unfathomable, that our children could be armed combatants at the age of 6. But even more so, how could they become the most feared fighting force to fully grown men who had been trained by the British Army? And it was because these kids had been growing up and indoctrinated that murder was noble and rape was normal. I mean, everything that is just horrific had been conditioned in these kids. You've spoken before about Paul Bloom and the massive amount of research that he's done. Well, we know in Bloom's research that morality is coded in a very young age. So if we code that morality in our kids to do horrific things, then absolutely they will. And the second example, maybe one that's a little bit more contemplative, occurred in my time in Afghanistan, where one of my local staff, Bashir, invited me to his family home for dinner. Very basic family home. Mud, straw, a single room that was the communal room. It served as the lounge room, the dining room, and the sleeping room, with 3 generations living in it, grandparents, parents, and kids alike. And we shared a meal on that floor. And in the process of talking geopolitics, Bashir was incredibly wise on geopolitics. Inevitably, the conversation did turn to family, and he asked some questions. Hey, do you live like this back in Australia? No, Bashir, we do not. Do you eat like this with 3 generations of families back in Australia? No, Bashir, we do not. And nearly ashamed to tell him that in most family groups, in most family units in Australia, the kids might be eating alone. Maybe they're eating with one parent. Perhaps the second parent comes back at a different time. Perhaps they're eating in front of the television. Well, none of these things were a thing in Afghanistan. There was no television. There was no electricity in this small village, save for a small amount of generated power. And it actually got me thinking, Justin, have we got it right? Are we saying that family is all important, but then diverting our attention to do something completely different?
We have an economy that demands things that are just not in harmony with the best interests of our children or our families, or even of us. It's extraordinary. Let's talk more about resilience generally. You've developed a model that I think is worth exploring, and obviously the book goes into it in depth. We can barely scratch the surface here. But let's just talk about a couple of basics around resilience. First off, there is a growing trend on the part of well-intentioned parents, and I get it because I've been guilty of it myself, to try to protect our children from stresses in life. Let's talk about why stress matters. Let's just start there and then move into resilience. Why does stress matter? And this is coming from a guy who has seen some of the most stressful, difficult, challenging, volatile adversity that life can throw at you.
We think about stress like it is all incredibly negative, but Yerkes and Dodson, 2 researchers over 100 years ago, proved that some stress in our life is beneficial. We can't have too little stress, we can't have too much stress, but the right amount of stress drives us to optimise performance. And the second comment I'd make to that is the thing called resilience, which is a big word that hopefully we've codified in a fairly coherent way. It varies by degree, not kind. So that amount of stress in your life, my life, the life of our parents should be the same amount of stress in our kids' life, but it varies by degree, not kind. So it's relative stress. Perhaps if I can cite one example, my youngest did not want to go to her year 10 school camp. She said, "Dad, I've got anxiety. I don't want to go. It's making me anxious. I'm not going to survive the school camp." Now, back when we were growing up, that wasn't a clinical term, that word anxiety. It was just called nervous. We said, "No, you're going to go. You'll grow from it." And on the other side of disturbance and disruption is growth. And so off she went. She came back, had an incredible time. And 12 months later, she's in the United States instructing at a summer camp herself. A little bit of stress is useful. And, you can also turn your attention to the problems with helicopter parenting and bulldozer parenting, the parents that are hovering around or clearing all obstacles. In longitudinal studies, we now know that that's not beneficial at all for the child. It's not teaching them their ability to emotionally regulate, to problem solve, to cope. It's not teaching any of the 3 core components of executive function, including cognitive flexibility and working memory. In fact, we're degrading the resilience of our kids by doing that.
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? Because we want the very best for them. And then when we see them uncomfortable, we kind of go, well, because I want the best for you, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to remove you from the discomfort. And yet that avoidance seems to reinforce the very anxiety that we're trying to alleviate.
It comes from a place of love and care and support. And I mean the inclusive place, not just parents, but aunts and uncles and grandparents and teachers and coaches and mentors. We all do it, try and wrap our kids up in cotton wool a bit because we love them so much or care or want to support them significantly, but it's not beneficial. We should allow them to have a little bit of stress. And interestingly, what the research says, at the youngest of ages, when their brains are incredibly neuroplastic, where we can laminate pathways that are highly beneficial. What does that mean for a toddler or waddler? Allow them to sit in the emotion, not dive in and try and do something about that emotion, good, bad, or indifferent emotion, but allow them to work out, okay, this emotion will pass. Jill Bolt-Taylor says it passes in 90 seconds. It certainly passes in less amounts of time in our kids. So allow them to wait it out rather than feeling like the only coping mechanism is the adult.
Critical that we remember just how quickly it can pass. It doesn't always. Like sometimes our kids will have an emotion. Just, I don't know, in the last month or two, one of my daughters who had a big crush on a boy, well, that all just, it blew up. It didn't quite work out. And the emotion lasted about, I'm going to say a week. There was a lot going on, but that's unusual. The day-to-day trivialities and challenges and basic adversities that we all encounter, they're gone pretty quickly. The person cuts you off on the road, you get really upset, and literally 60 seconds later, you've typically forgotten about it, unless it was really bad, Tim. Hey, let's move on to a question that I think really matters a lot here, and that is just at the very foundations, the foundational pillars of resilience. What have you written about these foundations?
Yeah, so our model in the Resilient Shield, the book I co-wrote with Dr. Dan Pronk and Ben Pronk, recognises layers of resilience. Now, this is an evidence-based model. It's been validated by the University of Western Australia. And to skate over what the layers are and then perhaps to contextualise them after all that. The first is an innate layer. So part genetics, part epigenetics, how you were brought up, where you were brought up, your DNA, and your experiences, including intergenerational experiences, counts for a bit. Now, for you and me, Justin, not very modifiable. There's a bit of your personality in there. There's some of your morality in there. Your values sit in there. So it is modifiable in some way, but not easily modifiable. The 4 truly modifiable layers are the mind layer. It's the importance of mindset and also the importance of meditation and mindfulness practices, which, yes, you can teach by age and stage to a toddler, waddler, tween and teen. Then there's the body layer. Unsurprisingly, sleep, diet and exercise, they exist in this healthy trinity. Anything you do on one of those angles influences the other angle. And I get no prizes for telling you or your listeners that. But when we're under stress load, what are the first three things that go? Inevitably, it's sleep, diet, and exercise.
We eat lousy, stop moving our bodies, and get less sleep. Yeah, totally.
That's right, that's right. And then there's the social layer, so the importance of social support systems, the people that are there for you, those that you're there for. Then the professional layer. If we suck at our job, it's likely to bring more stress in our life. This is about improving confidence and competence to overcome adversities in our professional life, including as stay-at-home parents, if that's the profession that you have. And then our bonus layer, I come back to the word you used right at the start, is adaptation. Our ability to do things that we never thought we'd be able to do if we are able to apply the rock-solid foundations established in those underlying layers. And the varies by degree and not kind model is absolutely transferable to our kids in all four stages of their development.
Yeah, it's really solid. I think there's so much there. Let me run something past you that I hear all the time when I'm talking to parents. Regularly, I'll be running my resilience presentations in schools and organizations, and I'll ask the question, when do your children show a lack of resilience? And consistently, I hear things like, well, they're not very resilient when they're tired or when they're hungry. And I often want to distinguish between resilience and willpower, or capacity to control yourself because you're depleted. And there's another element as well, and that is people will say, well, they show a lack of resilience when they don't want to try, like when they're ready to give up. And for me, this is my hypothesis. Willpower and resilience are different, and so too are perseverance and resilience. In short, if I have a lousy experience at school, I'm 8 years old and I have a blow up with my friends, I'm going to come home and I'm going to feel lousy. I might not be hungry. I might not sleep well. I might be a little bit emotional. But that doesn't mean that I'm lacking resilience. It means that I've had a bad day. And I wonder if you could unpack that a little more and either argue against what I'm saying or even flesh it out further based on your model and based on the work that you do with the Resilience Shield and with the new book about helping kids to be more resilient.
You think about stress and resilience like they're on a seesaw, with our resilience on one side and stress on the other, or our kids' resilience on one side and the amount of stress in their life on the other. And this isn't fair to compare. These things aren't relative, but actually, for the most part, we do go through lives with things in balance. So to your example, a bit more stress into our kids' life tips the scales in favour of the stress side of the seesaw. But remembering if they have had a trying time at school, whether it's intellectually, whether they have been cognitively sapped, whether it is sleep, diet, exercise, or the absence of social support, their friendship network is in their mind dissolving or disintegrating. A lot of resilience happens to be about rest and recovery. And we don't really think too much about that. The true psychological terms you're familiar with is the parasympathetic backlash. When we see this spike of stress, then our body wants to return it to homeostasis, but it dives back through that baseline of equilibrium in order to reconstitute the neurochemicals that we need to just establish this equilibrium. So that's the first thing, that a lot of resilience is all about rest and recovery, and our kids don't really recognise that, hence the importance to guide, shape and supervise them to do that. The second part that's a bit more interesting is how do we build motivation, tenacity, willpower, or to use Angela Duckworth's word, grit. And a lot of that is about a little part of our brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Now, the AMCC, very understudied part of our anatomy, is where we generate this tenacity, willpower and determination, and you can flex it by doing things that are slightly more uncomfortable than you're willing to deal with. And so we want our kids to be stressed to the point where they are flexing that AMCC. That's kind of crucially important. The other part that relates to this is not just Duckworth's work, but also Carol Dweck, her concept of the fixed and growth mindset. And those people who have fixed mindsets believe there is nothing I can do to change the outcome. Whereas the growth mindset individuals, and we can certainly instill this in our kids, recognise that failure is an opportunity to learn. And learning, of course, is an opportunity to grow. And there's a direct correlation to resilience inside that model as well.
So let's talk specifically about ways that we can grow resilience in kids. If parents could only take 1 to maximum of 3 things out of this conversation to bolster resilience for their children, what would they be?
I have to go to the wisdom of all the experts that I've interviewed for the book. I mean, in building resilient kids, there's probably 60 plus hours of interviews and wisdom from the experts. And the things that they would say back to you, Justin, would be role model of resilience you want to see in your kids. I don't know how many times we witness a parent saying one thing or doing something completely different. If you want your kids to grow up to be the best version of them, then show them how it's done. Let me give you some examples. So if you wake up in the morning and go and meditate, your child grows up watching you meditating. They don't put a label on that. It's just what mum or dad do to remain calm and balanced and centered, to build this level of self-awareness and self-reflection. If you always eat healthy, cook together and eat together, they don't describe that as nutrition. It's just the way we eat. And we could continue on. That'd be observation number 1.
I want to jump in on you here because this modeling is so important. When I think about resilience, one of the examples that I love to share, and I'd love your reaction, when you're in the car and somebody cuts you off, or when you're at a sporting event and the referee can't see very well with his 2 eyes what you can clearly see with your 1. And so you start making a big noise about decisions that don't go your way. What are the children seeing? We say that we want our kids to be resilient, but often our responses to the adversity and hardship that we encounter tends to be more reactive than resilient. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. There's without question. And it's largely because we are inundated with data. The University of California, Los Angeles says 34 gigabytes a day, and that's compounding 5% year on year. So how are you flushing the nonsense from your head? How are you bringing yourself to a place where your reaction isn't driven by the amygdala that thinks you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, not being cut off in traffic, and therefore creating space between stimulus and response? And of course, I'm paraphrasing Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That quote's been attributed to Frankl. But that space between stimulus and response is incredibly important. And we can practice it. Reps and sets really matter in order to get a better response. Now, it doesn't mean you won't be perfect. I had an outburst at my youngest just a couple of weeks ago. And of course, classic amygdala hijack. Thought the circumstance, which was a broken sink, was threatening my life. Thought it was the saber-toothed tiger. It was not. It was just a broken sink. And of course, the key measure here, when you think of Goleman's work on amygdala hijack, the key thing that a human reflects on immediately after having an amygdala hijack, the key emotion is shame and regret. And I experienced both of those nearly instantly, and I immediately went to my young Lucy, beautiful baby daughter, and apologised profusely for the way I'd reacted. So even though I know the theory, even though, yes, I meditate and I'm mindful and I try and get my brain into a place of balance, it can still happen, for sure.
So hard. So that's one, is great modelling. What would another really central strategy for parents be to bolster their kids' resilience?
Yeah, I turned the microphone around on the experts in my final question to everyone that I researched with for building resilient kids and said, what are the thing? What are the things? And specifically, what is the one thing that you would suggest that we should be allowing kids to do, enabling kids to do? And generally speaking, there was a common theme. Let them fail, but fail well. Let them understand that this isn't about the A+ on the report card, nor the blue ribbon at the sports carnival or the trophy. It's about the effort that they put out to get those things. That actually we want to be recognising that effort's more important than achievement. And it does certainly link back to the work of Carol Dweck, allowing them to learn from their failures rather than engineering their success. Now, we can do that. We can set the preconditions for our kids to be successful in nearly everything. Do their homework for them, make their lunch for them, drive them to school, don't allow them to be late for sporting practice, ensure that their school uniforms are always laundered. or we can insert some little stressors in their life that enable them to fail, to learn well, and to grow.
Tim, these insights are so fundamental, and in some ways they're so basic. Like, people would be listening going, yeah, I know that. And yet the simple is often the most profound. And these are the things that people, I think, will resonate with the most. I so much appreciate you sharing the wisdom that you've shared. Like I said, we've barely scratched the surface. Brand new book, Building Resilient Kids by Tim Curtis. Comes out next week. Available for pre-order now, I guess, online.
Yeah, absolutely. Ebook, audiobook, and also paperback, published by Pan Macmillan. Big shout out to Alex Lloyd, my editor. He's persisted with me on book number 2. But Building Resilient Kids, available in all good bookshops, and probably some of the bad ones too, Justin, on the 1st of July. Pre-order before the 1st of July. Yeah,
great. So jump online. We will link to Building Resilient Kids in the show notes so that you can, if this is something that's sparked your interest. Hey, just before we go as well, obviously you've done plenty of resilient things over the years. You've got a podcast. Tell us about the pod and how people can find out about that and how much of a resilience boost that's going to give them.
Yeah, there's 2 podcasts actually. The first one is the Unforgiving 60 podcast that I co-host with Ben Pronk, and it interviews people living lives less ordinary, those people who are inspiring us to do things bigger, better, maybe even a little bit badder. It's a bit of a variety show, but we look at what they do for themselves to go always a little further. Unforgiving 60 is a line from a Rudyard Kipling poem where Kipling challenges us to fill your unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. You'll be highly familiar with it, the poem If. Fill every moment in your life. And the second is a podcast by the name of the book, Building Resilient Kids, where I'll be exploring, initially with all of those cast members in the book, those people that I have interviewed, what do they do? How can we bring this to life by age and stage for all of our kids? A lot of this is codified in the tools and techniques inside the book, but more personally, what do they do that maybe isn't captured inside the interviews and inside print in the book?
Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll link to those in the show notes as well. Tim Curtis, the author, the podcaster, the former SAS Commander and squadron leader and everything else. What a privilege to be able to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for not just the books that you've written and the podcast that you host, but I know that this is one of those things that you see in American movies and on social media and you kind of roll your eyes, but what you do or what you've done for our country and for preserving peace and making a difference in the world, I just think that needs to be identified. It's not just impressive, it's noble and noteworthy, and I'm so grateful for people like you who are willing to do it. Thank you, Tim.
Appreciate your time. Lovely to be on your show.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. If you'd like more info about the things we've talked about, Tim Curtis's details are through all the show notes, and you can find out more about making your family happier by visiting happyfamilies.com.au.